Hello, everybody, and welcome to our June 11th IACBE webinar. This week we are partnering with CapSource, who I'm sure a lot of you have heard of before. They work with us on our student case study competition, both the fall virtual and the spring live in the past, virtual this year. And they're going to be talking about building virtual internship capacity. One of the things that they help institutions with, so they've got a lot of best practices that you can implement, and then they'll talk about some of the ways that they can help you with doing that at your own institutions. Your moderators for today will be Mr. Ted Collins, Vice President of Accreditation and Compliance at IACBE, and myself. We also have Preethi from CapSource, who's going to be helping us out, along with Jordan Levy. Ted, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be. Great to have you here. I'll be watching the, if you put your hands up or if you put something in the question area, tracking those so that we can make sure we get all your questions and everything answered. So again, thanks for being here and looking forward to this.
Thank you, Ted. So just as a refresher, for those of you who have not been in one of these before, we have a couple of goals or purposes for this. One is to learn more about a topic of interest, and today it's virtual internships, and then to also give you an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that you faced as a result of the global pandemic. So in the earlier session, we were asking people to share what they were doing with their internships and how they handled that, and hopefully you'll get some new ideas from this webinar. If you would like to participate, there is a question area where you can type a question, and we will either answer it in that area, or if it's something to the speaker, we'll present it to that person. So that's one way. The other way is there's a hand that you can click on, and that will give you an opportunity to actually, we'll call on you, unmute your microphone, and you can ask your question. So with that being said, it's time for me to introduce you to Jordan Levy, the founder of CapSource. And I'm going to give him control of the desktop here so that he can share his slides. And I believe we'll be making those available to people after this also, correct, Jordan, as well as the recording?
Yes, we will. Thank you so much, Phyllis, and thank you, Ted, as well, for being here and facilitating this session. We're so grateful to always be working with IACBE on elevating the quality of the learning experience for the students in the community. Of all the schools that you're reaching, I think it's a really exciting time for education, especially because we are moving into a virtual world. And there's a lot of questions that institutions have about the role that they're now playing in the process of building meaningful programs and meaningful learning experiences for their students. So what we've decided to do here today is talk a little bit about building internship capacity. And I put virtual in brackets because, you know, this is the concept that's kind of emerging. There's always been a role for schools in helping students find internships, and it's been growing as a main focal point, especially towards the end of an undergrad tenure or during graduate programs. But now with COVID, virtual is really becoming more and more important to keep in mind. How do you do this in a fully virtual capacity? So it's not just about moving curriculum online, but also thinking about moving career services online, project-based experiential learning online. So that's really what we're going to be talking about here today. And it's really about helping the students. So I wanted to quickly give a moment to Preethi to say hello. She's on my team. She's on the marketing team with us. And she'll be here to answer any questions related to the content that we're sharing. Preethi, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Preethi, like Jordan introduced. I'm really excited to be here. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat feature and I will respond as soon as possible. So yeah.
Thanks, Preethi. So
And Jordan, if I know you talk fast, we have a lot of international members, so if you can slow down just a little bit, it's easier for them to understand.
surely.
Thank you.
We're going to start off with just a quick test of the chat function. So if you don't mind, one of the things that we're most interested in is how you're preparing for the upcoming academic year. So if you have any changes in your plans or you'd like to share any recent updates, that would be a great way to start. So please introduce yourself, mention which organization you're writing in from, and any updates. We'd love to hear from you. So as a quick hello again, I'm Jordan Levy, the founder and executive director of CapSource. We're an IACBE partner that works on building the experiential project-based live case competitions, which traditionally was offered in the spring in conjunction with ACAM. But this year, at the end of our presentation, we'll be sharing a little bit more about two really exciting additional live case opportunities that you can integrate into your school community moving forward. So after the introductions, we'll be talking about the experiential bargain, which is a new concept that we've created to help not only students and companies understand what they're trading in order to engage in experiential learning and in experiential hiring, but also what the role of institutions is in that bargain. And then in addition, we'll talk just briefly about how CapSource can help as a facilitator in the process of building experiential learning into the curriculum at your schools. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with a little bit of information about the live case experiences that are coming up for the academic year this year. So one of the first things I always like to start with is talking about the skills gap. And this is really the purpose and why our mission is to bridge the skills gap in the work that we do. And so the first kind of a big glaring number is that almost 90% of employers do not strongly believe that students are prepared for day one on the job, especially because students are enrolling into college programs for career outcomes. This is a number that needs to change over the next decade. And that is something that we find extremely important as you begin to make decisions about improving programs to focus on making sure that your school's outcomes are better than 90% of employers not strongly believing. In addition, we believe that there's really not enough internships out there for students. Ross Perlin, in a book called Internation, discusses that there's about 1.5 million internships filled in the US every year. And there's 20 million college students enrolled in the US between undergraduate and graduate programs. And so kind of the shocking part there is that means that under 8% of students are getting a chance to intern every year. And internships tend to be the largest factor in early career success. And so that's another number that you should benchmark yourself against as a school is like, are you enabling more schools to have internship or at least internship-like experiences every year than 8% of your student body? So we think the answer to the skills gap and the answer to the lack of internships that are available is industry-integrated, project-based experiential learning. Sometimes for short, we call it experiential learning, but this longer form description really helps to understand what type of experiential learning we're referring to. So first and foremost, we call it industry integrated, meaning whether you're working with a local mom and pop shop, you're working with nonprofits in your community, you're working with larger corporates or other types of SMBs, it's important that there's real organizations with real stakeholders that provide real projects that have real stakes. And the real projects part, it's not easy to design some of these collaborations because the key is to align company goals with teaching goals so that everyone could walk away feeling like a winner, and that they've put time into something that actually benefits both themselves as an organization and the students that are involved. And lastly, I think one of the most important factors of experiential learning is reference-worthy experience. And so the key to think about here is, are we able to do this in a virtual environment, right? I think one of the easy things is, make it feel experiential in person. Well, showing up to anywhere is an experience, right? But at the end of the day, we want to make it a really meaningful experience. And so that really comes down to, enabling, collaboration across digital tools, whether it's collaboration tools, communication tools, project management tools, video conferencing. There's lots of really amazing tools that every company is now using, and it's only in the student's best interest to learn how to manage working as a team and collaborating in a virtual environment. So we're doing the same types of projects, but really in a fully virtual capacity. So this is our experiential learning framework. Hopefully this is not new to you guys. We built this out over the last academic year. After we've done this now, several hundred times, it's really helpful to be able to memorialize it so that we can replicate and scale it and explain it to our customers and users. So the experiential learning framework kind of helps people understand how students flow through the experiential learning process. So the key here is that students are using universal skills, which are also called soft skills, in addition to relevant tools and technical skills, in order to develop real outcomes for real stakeholders who provide real feedback along the way. And then the key to experiential learning is the reference-worthy experience. And that means it's something that the students can showcase on their LinkedIn, on their resume, and discuss during interviews. And the most important part about reference-worthy experience is it's not a case study. It's not a textbook assessment or a quiz or an exam or a paper. It's an actual project with real stakeholders that they can say, I accomplished X for organization Y, and you could talk to Representative Z about their experience working with me. And that's what makes it so meaningful, is that it's not just a course, it's actually an internship-like experience that they can now add to their resume. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about experiential learning, the key is to start thinking about what are the companies in this for? What is the purpose that the companies get involved in the education process for students? And so we've coined recently the term the experiential bargain. And so that really is about how experiential learning trades off with experiential hiring. And so experiential learning is about theory application. On the other side, that's about fresh ideas, right? So the students are applying theories, the companies are getting fresh ideas. Now, in experiential learning capacity, it's all about real projects with real stakes. For companies, it's about cost-effective solutions. They're getting solutions for those real projects with real stakes. The next is about skills development. So about giving students a foundation of skills that they can use in their career. For the companies, it's about training and onboarding new talent. For students, it's about professional networking and connecting with mentors and folks from brands that they appreciate and love. And for companies, it's about employer branding and reaching out to those customers or those users or those student ambassadors or enthusiasts and connecting with them in a meaningful, productive way. And then lastly, we talk again about reference-worthy experience, which is a key outcome for experiential learning. I always say that experiential learning isn't actually about the process, it's about the outcomes. If you really want to make it an experiential learning opportunity for students, it has to be great on the outcomes side as an experience that they can reference, not necessarily a good learning experience itself. And then lastly, we talk about how this really is all about evaluating talent and hiring the talent that companies feel are the best fit for their culture and their goals and their current challenges. So to now change a lens a little bit here, so what is the role of institutions in this whole process? We talked a little bit, the title here is about building internship capacity. And so if we don't talk about the role of institutions, it's hard for institutions to understand how they fit into building the capacity for experiential learning. So here, we talk about three main concepts: organization of the experiential learning engagements, facilitation of those experiences, and then accreditation, so providing recognition. So to dive into organization, that's all about structuring the learning experiences and ensuring that the students are prepared, the companies are prepared, and the scope is clear. And a lot of schools like to have the students scope out their own projects. It's pretty hard for students to scope their own projects if they've never actually worked on a project in their life. It becomes much easier if you've exposed them to some project with some structure, and then the next time around, give them a little bit more leeway in scoping their own projects. Otherwise, we always recommend scoping it and ensuring there's clear deliverables and clear expectations from the get-go. And I think another thing that's very important in the design part of these experiences is ensuring that the companies are prepared, not only prepared in how to facilitate this experience, but prepared, what resources they need to contribute in order to ensure the students are learning. What are the key aspects of data and people that need to be involved in the project process to ensure that the outcomes are meaningful? So facilitation is actually about, achieving those goals and not doing it for the students, but creating an environment that enables them to succeed. And so that's really about mentoring them and ensuring that the learning is the top priority for the experience. And I think, at the end, you really want to ensure that the students are moving through that scope, or that project charter, as we call it on our system, so that at the end, they've achieved the measurable learning objectives, and the teaching goals have also been met. And so that's what makes this a learning experience, as opposed to, a regular job or any type of work experience that would be a lot less structured. And then also it makes it easier to grade if you understand in advance what was expected of the students. So that's another key factor when it comes to facilitation. And then that's a good segue into accreditation. And so accreditation is really about recognizing students for their work and ensuring that, maybe they're not getting paid for these experiences, but they're learning, and you're providing recognition of the specific skills and the topics that they now have fluency in, because they've gotten a chance to sink their teeth into something real. And ultimately, they can now package that as reference-worthy experience. So that kind of talks about organization, facilitation, and accreditation. And if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. I'm sure there may be a few here, because this is a lot of good meat on the bone. And we're actually going to be publishing an article about this shortly to go into a lot more depth. But we're really glad that we get a chance to explain it to the IACBE community first, because we know how focused you are on teaching and learning. So to transition here, I wanted to ask Phyllis what important role that schools play in the experiential bargaining. What have you seen be the most successful? What do you think really the role of the institution is in this experiential bargain, so to speak?
Yes, thank you, Jordan. This is a very interesting presentation, and I can really relate to it because in one of my positions at a university, I was the internship coordinator back when internships were really considered work experience. And the experience that a student got during this was showing up on time, being there when they're supposed to be, and oftentimes how to make copies. They honed their filing skills, and they got really good at making coffee for people. It wasn't really the knowledge experience that we wanted students to have. Students were seen as free labor for jobs that they didn't really want to hire people for. In looking at it as experiential learning, and you're focusing on the learning that takes place, that's where the role of the institution is so very, very important to ensure, as Jordan said, there's very clear guidelines, that the scope of the project is outlined, that when you work with students on internships, there's learning outcomes for that particular internship just like you would if you were teaching a regular class with those students. It's not just sending them out and go learn something. So really every internship will have learning outcomes, some of which are common and some of which are unique to the experience that the student is working on. And finally, I think the institution's role to work with the employer, with the work site, they don't always know how to manage interns. They're used to having employees that they give an assignment to, and they're evaluating them at the end of that on different terms than you are a student who you're expecting to learn something. The employer evaluates them on whether the project or the output was good. But as educators, we have specific outcomes that we're looking for, and helping the employer to understand those and to know how to evaluate those is, I think, that final piece in our responsibility in making these experiential learning opportunities really valuable for students. And what I'd like to do now is ask if we have anybody. We've got a lot of people here, close to 50. If there's anybody who has an experience with internships, and it can be good or bad, because a lot of times we learn more from those that don't go as well, that they could share with the rest of the group something they learned or saw in an internship. So I'll give you a minute to think about that. Ted, do you have anything to add here while we're looking for a lucky volunteer?
Yes, I think one of the things I learned being on that side of it as a dean and an instructor was that it was really important, as you said, to be able to train the site visit supervisors on what was expected and the businesses. And so what we would do is we'd have an initial meeting on site before we ever approved the business. So it wasn't just we'll send our students to anyone. And then I would meet with every supervisor once during the term, and then again with the student and the supervisor at the end of the term. So if there were questions that hadn't been filled out completely, or if they had just given the student all 5s because they said, yeah, they were great, we could get a lot more detail. And of course, that helps then when you're looking at your accreditation, being able to show that you actually have a valid measurement and you're getting good results from it.
Great, thank you, Ted. I see Leslie has her hand up. So Leslie, I am unmuting your microphone. Do you have something to share with us?
Sure. So I'm from American International College, and I am responsible for the business internships. Part of my frustration with internships is paperwork, right? So I have been there almost a year, and there's different paperwork that have been being used by different people. And so I'm trying to streamline and do best practice as far as we have to have an application and we have to have a waiver for the school part. But I'm interested in what people are using for those site supervisors, for the programs there. We do have a mid and end of term eval that goes both to the student to evaluate the site and for the site supervisor to evaluate the student. However, I'm interested to hear what are people doing as far as writing out a program plan and expectations and job description and all of those things so that everybody is on the same page. When we had done the regional conference last fall, there was a presentation on the internships, and I thought it was very well done, and creating a portfolio. And if anybody has any information to share on that, or could forward to us, et cetera, to kind of use as a template, that would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. So here's a call for people to share. Certainly, if you have anything that you would like to share, we would love to have you do that. You can send it to me and I can share it with the rest of the group. I saw somebody else had a hand raised. I think it was Ricky. Ricky, your microphone is open if you have a comment.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ricky Madison from the continents. So I had an issue with the internships, especially right now. We work virtually with the students and staff members, the concern is with interns working remotely, there's really no way to track the progress of their daily duties. So being remotely, we try to implement like several software, several open source applications online to track the interns progress, but really I don't believe it's really a good option to have interns working remotely. It's just because there's no way to track the progress. This is the only concern that I have with the interns at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. And I think Jordan may address some of these as he moves on with this. I think there's some things that he can talk to you that you can do, and I think there's some things that CapSource can help you with. So I will turn this back over to Jordan, and we'll have some more questions in just a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to remain on this slide for a moment because I think some of the questions that just came up are actually awesome because they're really about growing pains when it comes to the role of the institution and the experiential bargain. So most schools are settling in and realizing, wow, like we can play a key role in helping students gain internship experience. You know, we could take some of the pressure off of the companies and mentor the students through these experiences, coordinate these experiences to make sure that they're learning focused and not necessarily just for the sake of getting the student into the workplace and getting coffee and all of the more menial tasks. And so I really think that comes down to the design. And I think that also kind of feeds into the other question that was asked about paperwork. So I look at the design of these experiences less as paperwork and more as writing a syllabus, right? And we call them project charters, not project scopes, because it's really a charter. It tells students, hey, you have the ability to work on this project. And this is a project that involves real stakeholders that have real stakes on the line, and they want to get your opinions and your ideas into the fold. And so this is especially crucial in a virtual environment, because if that's not set up in advance, then 3 weeks into the engagement, the students start twiddling their thumbs because they're not hearing back from the company gets distracted, students get distracted. So that's why it's very important to not design these as an internship, like a traditional internship that would be done in person, but more of a research-oriented student consulting project is what we kind of always pitch these to companies as. And the reason that we pitch them that way is because if they're research-oriented, they don't need to be supervised by a company personnel the whole time that they're working, but they're really doing something that enables them to learn about the industry, learn about the product, learn about those business models, learn how to work as a team, learn how to do research, and find great references that can help them deliver excellent results. And so I think there's definitely parts of coordinating internships that are laborious, like the paperwork around NDAs and IP assignments, which is all stuff that we try to solve through our technology platform, and we'll show you a little bit of that towards the end of the presentation. But the other key part is really ensuring that the project is scoped out, at least from an academic research perspective, before the students get started, so that even if they're underway and the company gets distracted and you're not getting exactly what you want from them, you can at least turn it into a case study, right? And so you have enough context, you have enough understanding, you have enough resources to make it work as a learning experience, rather than, oh my God, I have no idea what the students are doing in this virtual interaction with companies. So I want to quickly transition and wrap up our discussion around the experiential bargain, and then we'll talk about some of the formats that you can use to make this process easier and how our services and software make this scalable for institutions. So we talked a little bit about what's in it for the students and companies, and we talked about the role of institutions, but we actually haven't really talked at all about what's in it for institutions, right? And not only institutions, but their faculty and their overall community. And so, the first thing I'll mention is I was a student. I went to a business undergraduate institution, and I felt like I was getting a great degree, but I didn't feel like I was prepared for my career. And that's actually why I went to school in the first place. And that's becoming an increasingly common trend as to why students are opting to go to four-year institutions. So prioritizing that not only through career services, but also through curricular activities is crucial, because that's what's going to separate schools from the herd, and be able to say, hey, we can actually help you, not only get prepared for your career, but figure out what that career actually looks like and how to start it, and who you could talk to that might be an alumni or an employer that we have a relationship with to get that off the ground. So I talked briefly just now about alumni employer engagement and program marketability, but that's really what comes out of this, right? Employer engagement is less about getting the employers to show up and more about getting the employers to meaningfully collaborate. And then, of course, if you do this right, you can start to market these programs as something that really separates your institution from anyone else. Now, in addition to that, these can be endowment boosters, right? There's some amazing examples of how institutions have been able to charge companies, tax deductible fees to participate in these programs. And that's the beautiful employer pay model that we've all been thinking about and all been chasing. And as government funding goes down, someone else needs to foot the bill. And I think we all realize that students is a really bad source to foot the bill, especially because they really are uninformed about what they're buying in the first place. So adding debt to their lives right when they're supposed to be getting started is just a really bad way to do things. So hopefully this will actually alleviate some of the financial burden on the students by charging the companies. In addition to that, I think this makes for a really amazing learning community. So not only is one of the coolest things about experiential learning is that the students aren't the only ones that are learning. The faculty are learning, right? They're facilitating the students through a project. They're coming up with their ideas and helping the students execute on those ideas. They're interacting and using new tools with companies that have real problems. And then all of that really leads to more research opportunities, sinking your teeth deeper into those companies and saying, hey, I noticed that you had an organizational behavior challenge in when we were doing the project from last semester. Would it be cool? I have this framework, I have this idea, this concept I want to try out. Would you be open to letting me research? So that's kind of what really happens as a result of shifting from a content-based curriculum institution to a experiential-based curricular institution. So what does building internship capacity mean? It means enabling more students to learn through internship-like experiences. And as we touched on in the beginning of this presentation, only 8% of students can get an internship every year. So internships are not the solution. It needs to be programming that's put together by schools that enable students to get internship-like experiences. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. What is an internship-like experience? It's basically experiential learning as we package it. And we're going to go through 4 different formats that could be used to actually deliver experiential learning to students at scale. So the first one is the most common one that's used. It's called a capstone project. It's one group of students working on one project for one company. It's easy to manage. The greatest part about capstones is the peer-to-peer learning, and that faculty are a mentor, they're not a liaison. So the students get direct access to the company. The second is a co-op. That is basically the same thing as a capstone, except instead of a group of students, it's an individual student. I do not recommend co-ops. They require a lot more work on the individual student. And so instead of being one credit course, it really should be more than one credit. Instead of being peer-to-peer learning, they're forced to kind of work by themselves, especially in a virtual world that's a little bit difficult. So there's no one that they can really lean on and get help from. It's harder to get companies to approve those because they want to interview the students versus a company. We've coordinated over 150 capstones over the last few years. Not once has a company asked to interview every student on the capstone project. So it's a way to kind of alleviate some of the traditional barriers for some students to get work experience because of their background or their skill set or any other criteria that's typically used improperly during screening through ATS systems and what have you. And so I think co-ops are not something that we recommend, but it is a model that's used by some schools. So we actually help facilitate those, we showcase those, but it's a lot less scalable. So that's something to keep in mind. The other 2 formats that I think are the best formats, especially for earlier stage students like freshman and sophomore level students, or schools that want to scale experiential learning but don't necessarily have the bandwidth to coordinate a single project for every group of 5 students. You have 1,000 students, that's 200 projects. That's a lot to manage. So we have examples of live case competitions, and that's something I hope you guys are familiar with because that's exactly what we offer through the IACBE live case experiences. And then we also have another twist on the format called a live case collaboration, which we'll go into. But basically the gist is instead of one project, many teams, it's multiple projects, multiple teams. So it's a little bit of a different environment because the students can learn from each other as they're moving through it. So we're about to get into some examples here. I'm going to flip through this rather quickly, but what I will recommend is to check out our website after we wrap up here today. There are examples of each one of these and the documentation, the project charter, the outline of what a project looks like that's appropriate for a live case collaboration that includes, marketing, finance, data, and product development. A capstone project that revolves around growth strategy. Live case competitions that we've run with IACBE before. So these are all examples that are available for you. They're similarly structured, and we'll get into some of those shortly. So the first one, the easiest one to kind of showcase is a co-op. It's the most similar to a regular internship. That's because the students often get pulled in to projects rather than having a project designed for them. And I know that's one of the other reasons why I don't think that co-ops are the best solution, but it's a great solution if that's the only solution and you really want to forge individual partnerships between students and companies, ensure that the student has a mentor. There's lots of criteria that's available for you to customize. First and foremost, you can actually go with a shorter term one. So, hey, we're going to do this over a 4 to 7 week period versus a full semester, or even a 1 week period and do it almost as like a job shadowing type of experience. You can customize the topics. You can customize, how the student is collaborating with the company. But the ultimate thing that's consistent across all these formats is the fact that you're designing a scope. And so this is an example from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. A student reached out to us and said, hey, I want to do an internship. I'm going to get 3 credits for it, but I can't find an internship. Can you help me? And so we connected him with a company that was based locally that was interested in getting feedback on how they're developing their product and their marketplace. It's a very cool company that helps startups pitch large corporations by getting the corporations to submit RFPs through their system. And so the whole idea here, just like the series that we went through earlier with the role of institutions, organize, run the project, and then prepare for scale and ensure educational outcomes. And so that's what this was really all about. Student got credit. Instead of getting paid, company got outcomes, and ultimately everyone walked away feeling like this was a great learning experience. Now, the most common model, as I mentioned, is the capstone model. So typically this will accommodate from 2 to 6 students. If you have more than 6 students, it is too large of a group to facilitate, and so that automatically becomes a live case, and we recommend breaking up those students into multiple groups and having them work on smaller size teams. It naturally avoids the free rider problem. Of course, you'll see again, this is a student-centric model, meaning students have direct access to the companies. They also have access to their educators as a mentor. And so this is the same types of variables. You can change the duration, you could change the location, the modality, the topics, the industry, the rigor. So lots of really cool facets here that ultimately lead to a great learning experience for the students. This is a really cool set of capstones that we've been coordinating for the University of Richmond. Ever since COVID pandemic hit in the spring, they had to cancel their trip to Prague. But what a great opportunity to, instead of go to Prague, work with companies based in Prague and help the students learn about business in Latin America. And so these are the 3 projects that we coordinated for the spring semester for their students. They went swimmingly well. They came back to us and said, these students actually want to do more projects over the summer. Can you find more companies? And so these are all in a capstone format. They're all research oriented. As you notice, these are the titles of those cases, and they're all available if you register through our website and check out the Robbins School of Business. You'll actually be able to see these example projects. Quelga is a home decor company. eMove is a scooter company, and Winnipeg Capital is an investment firm that's got relationships with capital sources in Spain that's trying to get a foothold in Latin America. And so it's a really cool way for students to say, okay, I know about scooters in the US, but I want to learn about scooters in, in Peru. And so the last two examples here are the live cases. And so these are really cool because they scale up really nicely, but they're educator-centric models. And what we mean by that is it's not about having the students interact with the company, but it's more about having the students interact with each other and their faculty, and then the faculty will facilitate communication with the company. That doesn't mean that the students will never present. And we'll talk a little bit about the live case competition format, where the students get a chance, once or twice throughout the semester to do office hours with the company or present their final presentations directly to the company. But most of the experience is contained to their group and their faculty mentor. And the learning happens because the students are working through the project. And so in this case, because there's one faculty, multiple groups, and multiple projects, the projects kind of neatly complement each other and supplement each other, right? So, hey, one student group's learning about the finance and can say to the ops department, hey, did you check into, how they're allocating funding for, talent or HR, or how they're, investing into product. And then, so they'll talk to each other as if it's really an organization and a real team at a company that's working together. And so I really like that format, and I think it's definitely something that's used pretty frequently with our clients that want to deliver experiential learning to anywhere from 7 to 200 students at once. This is my favorite example. We work with Northern Illinois University in their Intro to Business course, and so they always offer a 4-project series to their intro students. All of them have not declared majors. All of them are trying to understand what they want to do in their lives, what they feel like is their skill set, what types of skills they want to use in their career. And so this is a really cool program that allows the students to actually choose which project they want to do and work with students that also chose that project. And so every section of the course is split into 8 groups. There's 2 teams assigned to each project. And as you'll notice, one project's about finance and accounting, another one's based on economics and regulation. A third one is based on data analytics, and the fourth one is talent management and employee churn. And so these projects kind of complement each other. The students present to each other, and then at the end of the semester, they present back to the company with a few Q&A sessions in between. The last format, which is the most scalable, is called a live case competition. This is the format that we use for IACBE's live case experiences. And those experiences are an easy way for you to incorporate experiential learning into your curriculum without having to set up anything new. And so the cool thing here is that there's multiple teams. So we usually get between 8 and 12 teams participate. We're looking for about 20 to 30 this year per competition. So hopefully we'll get even more interest than usual. And so the idea is in basically a fully virtual capacity, the teams work together with their faculty mentors on one project that's carefully defined. And there's a few instances where they get to work directly and present directly to the host company, but otherwise the learning is contained to that environment. And it's a really cool experience for the students. They get a chance to sink their teeth into something real, and it's scalable, right? We're reaching anywhere from 40 to 80 students every single time we run one of these programs. And so that's why it's scalable, but it costs a lot less because you only need one company to participate, only need one scope to organize and define the learning objectives that are aligned with company goals. So this is the example of the fall virtual case competition that we ran last fall, which went really well. A company called Munevo, which is based in Germany, trying to enter the United States with a medical product, a medical device called Munevo Drive. And it's a wheelchair that folks with disabilities can use and control with movements of their head. And so the amazing thing here is the students are learning about product development. They're learning about medical devices and the reimbursement process. They're learning about how to get a product that's developed in Germany into the United States. And so you can't do that in a case study. You can't do that in a textbook. You have to do that with a real project, real stakeholders, real product, real timely challenges. And so post-university And St. Thomas Aquinas won. Post was the graduate winner. St. Thomas was the undergrad winner. And so they were actually afforded discounted access to the live case competition for ACAM, which was pretty exciting. And actually, Post University won again. For the graduate cohort. And we interviewed all of the participants. They had a great experience. And I believe they'll continue to participate in these experiences because it's an amazing opportunity for their students to get out of the traditional classroom context and not only work as a team, but compete, and which I think is a lot of fun. And, I always say that everyone's a winner because there's no losing in experiential education, just winning and learning. Of course, there are winners in competitions, but it's not really about being the number one winner. It's just about getting through this experience, learning from the experience, and that's what makes experiential learning so powerful. So I wanted to take a moment to break here. We have about 15 minutes left in the presentations, but I just wanted to kind of get a gauge from you guys. Do you have any questions about the formats? Have you used any of these? Are there any new ones that are of interest to you that you've never heard of before or never tried? Feel free to drop it into the chat. I would love to hear from you guys, and I hope so far this has been valuable because these are the engagements formats that we've coordinated previously that we've seen a lot of success in, and so we hope you see these as some best practices that you can adopt.
Hi, Jordan, it's Phyllis. I'd like to jump in here for just a minute while people think about this and get their questions typed so that we can look at those. And in thinking about this, in my time in the classroom, I've worked with students on internships, on capstone projects, with employers. And one of the things that I find really unique about this is the competition piece. And when I was thinking about it, in a lot of other areas in education, there's competition. We know in sports there is, and we know that it's very valued because it builds teamwork and leadership, and it helps the members of the team to learn about winning and losing and how willing are they to do what it takes to try to win. If you look at a lot of the performing arts in higher education, art, music, dance, there's a competition and a performance piece. In business, we don't normally have that. There's not a way for students to compete. And I think when they compete, they get a different appreciation of what teamwork and leadership are. They find that they can't hide in a team of 4 or 5. When you're in a group and it's competing, there's a lot of peer pressure for everybody to perform because every member is important. And the students get a chance to feel that real world pressure. There's deadlines. If a student's working on a capstone project, they can come to their instructor and say, I'm behind, I need an extra day, and they may get that time. At work, if your presentation is due at noon on Thursday, you have to give it at noon on Thursday. Your boss isn't going to give you extra time. These competitions, because they have very strict timelines, things have to be done. There are deadlines when they have to submit their documents. And if they don't meet those, it's unfortunate, but that's part of the piece. And I think it teaches them real responsibility. I think the other piece that I found really interesting this year was that you can't anticipate the challenges. When the competition started, when you and I started talking about it last year, we had no idea that it would go from being in Dallas to being virtual, and all of that done in really a very short period of time. And I really want to commend the teams that participated and continued to participate in that, because I think the biggest learning experience that the teams got out of this year's competition was persevering and being flexible and adaptable to be able to move from meeting together at their school to meeting virtually and still having products that were amazing. I've looked at the videos and what the students prepared, and just because they had to go to virtual, they didn't make that an excuse for doing lesser work. And as an employer, I'm looking for employees who can work virtually now, who can be self-directed and on their own. So I think besides the knowledge they gained and the experience with employers, their perseverance was really just amazing to me. So hopefully this gets people thinking, and we've got some comments I think that people have made, and maybe Preeti or Ted can share those, and maybe we've got some people willing to share an experience or two now. Anybody out there with anything to share? Have you thought about the competitions? Do we have anybody on who's had a team in one of the competitions? I see Leora had her hand raised. Leora, your microphone's open.
Wonderful, thank you. I was just wondering, given the way that you support students in obtaining these opportunities, how do you find that students are able to actually develop the underlying skills that they need to, when they graduate, go out into the world as new professionals and learn the skills to obtain professional positions as they get 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years without having to work with a staffing agency because they haven't learned? How do I go through an application process? How do I do a job interview? How do I network? Those sorts of things.
I think it's a great question. I think really it comes down to giving students tools in their toolbox, and that's really what education is all about, right? I think asking a student to go out there and interview if they've never been in a work situation, like how are you supposed to showcase, like, yeah, I can work as a team and here's an example, or I've solved a marketing issue for a real organization before and here's an example. And so that's really what interviewing comes down to, is like, how prepared are they for this specific position and how well do they understand what they're getting themselves into? And so, yes, it is not the same as, having the students go out and interview because you're coordinating these for them, but that's the role of the institution and the experiential bargain. If this is not learning, it's work, right? And so we're making it about learning. But as soon as there's a very fine line between, work and education. It's a transition that's very hard for a lot of people. And so what we're trying to do is help institutions think more about, okay, how do we give the students the tools that they need, whether it's some of the soft skills we talked about, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, or technical skills. And that could be analytics, it could be project management, it could be, marketing tools, social media tools. Like, what tools do they know how to use? And so we actually just recently published an entire overview of different technological tools that we recommend using and getting adept to as you transition into your career. And so that's available on our website under Learn More. It's called Tech Resources Guide. So definitely take a look at that. And those are some key tools that will be, enable students to be shining stars to say that they have some experience. So in the interest of time here, I'm going to transition off to talk a little bit about what CapSource does so that you can understand a little bit more about how we can ultimately help. And then we'll talk a little bit about the live case competitions, but we're certainly going to save a bit for the webinar next week, which is going to be about the live case experiences that are coming up. So first and foremost, what we offer here at CapSource is a combination of software and services. And our main service is called sourcing and design. And so basically what that means is allowing educators to register and submit requirements that we can use to match them with companies and design projects that align their teaching goals with those company goals. And so that process is the instructional design process. It's building a curriculum around a project-based learning experience. And then the end is all about preparing everyone for launch. Is it clear when it's launching? Is it clear what the immediate deliverables are? Are all the resources organized and accessible? That's what you could do through our platform. And so we talked a little bit about those formats. So you would just select the format and choose your topics. We offer 20 topics, everything from the one seen here to international expansion, to marketing, data analytics, growth strategy are some of our most popular topics. And so it's a really cool way, whether you're a liberal arts educator or you're a business educator or an engineering educator, to start thinking about companies and your student skills as one common language. The next thing I wanted to mention is the Connect system. And so the Connect system is actually a tool that we built for us because we were sourcing companies for such varying programs that we needed a way to organize these in a consistent way. And what we realized when we were building this was that the customers that we had could actually use this as their own portal to source and design their own projects, or at least have a centralized system to design and source experiential learning projects for students. And so that's actually what we do is we kind of flip the model on its head. And instead of saying through like career services platforms like Handshake and grad leaders, this is about instead of saying, hey, give us your job applications and we'll throw the students at this platform and hope sparks fly. This is about intentionally designing projects based on teaching goals. And it's a very different environment for the companies. They have a user role. The students and educators have a user role. And it's all about, can you design projects and ensure that everyone's on the same page? So the first thing that's really of value here is that you get to capture and understand who are the companies in your ecosystem. And that's a very important part of building scalable experiential learning programs, is being able to revisit these companies and understand, oh, these companies are interested in working with me on marketing, on capstone projects. They're located around the corner or they're international, and trying to understand the key criteria about them so that you can make decisions about collaborations. The second thing is about actually producing well-defined project scopes, which we've talked about at length during this presentation. And so this is actually a screenshot of that Burger King example from Northern Illinois University. But basically, there's a project scope that explains, okay, what do we mean by analyzing financials to explore and eliminate cost variances? Well, first, we have to basically explain what financials are to students who are freshman level at Northern Illinois. So that was really what they started with, was a data dump of the financials. The second was, what are cost variances? How do, we actually found out there's like 254 SKUs that Burger King needs to incorporate into running any Burger King, everything from the mayo to the cleaning supplies for the bathroom. It's 254 products. And so they were actually invited to come to Burger King, look at how the stores were being managed, look at how the employees are using materials, and trying to understand what actually creates the cost variances. And so that's how we developed a scope that ran through the semester that made it very clear what the expectations were of the students. So to wrap us up here, I wanted to ask Phyllis to just talk briefly about the live case experiences and the relationship that we have between CapSource and IACBE, that we're now turning the fourth page and fourth year in our chapter together. So I just wanted to enable Phyllis to help us transition so that we can touch briefly on the live case experiences that are coming up for this fall and spring.
Thank you, Jordan. This will be our 10th year. Next year, 2021, will be our 10th year hosting a student case competition. And we started out wanting to do it because we wanted to have a way for students to be involved in our conference, and a way for faculty to be able to showcase what they had been doing with their students. And for those of you who've been around, we've had ethics competitions, we've had case study competitions. We've done it in a variety of ways, but it's always been a once-a-year event. It was at the annual conference, and it was up to the faculty to figure out how to prepare their students pretty much to go, if you're into college football, to go to the Rose Bowl, to the championship game, but nothing leading up to it. And I think one of the biggest benefits of what we've been working with Jordan on in this experiential learning piece is developing an academic year experience that students can engage in, with the culmination of it being the case competition in conjunction with our annual conference. And Jordan will talk more about this, but everything from cases that you can go to their website and get, and students can practice with, a more structured case system that you can use for your students, to the fall virtual competition where you can have multiple teams, and ending with sending a team to the annual conference competition. So we're trying to follow what a lot of other sports do, where there's a process where your students can grow in this competition phase. And I think that, as I mentioned before, that prepares them in so many ways for what it's like out in the real world. It helps them to learn to be adaptable, to realize there's deadlines they have to meet, to work with other people on a team to achieve a common goal, and to know that what they're doing really has meaning. It's not just a paper that the faculty member is going to grade, but as they move through that process, it can be something that the company actually adopts, and that they can tell employers when they're in interviews that they actually helped a company create a solution to a problem. So I think that's what it means. It's really taking experiential to that next step. I know it's hard for us to do individually in our classrooms, but there's a lot of models out there that we can use, and there's resources from many different areas. We just feel that CapSource is most reflective of how IACBE looks at experiential learning, but there are definitely other options for you out there. And I'll turn it back over to you, Jordan.
Thank you, Phyllis, and thank you all for bearing with us. I know we're running low on time here, so I'll flip through this rather quickly, but I did want to mention that we'll be talking about this again next week, June 18th, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be doing an info session specifically on these 3 case competitions that are coming up. So please join us then if you're interested in learning more about these. But we're introducing for the first time ever a Scholastic Fall Live Case Competition Kit. And then as well, we're going to be delivering the Fall Virtual and the Spring ACAM Live Case Competition again. Fall Virtual for the 2nd time, Interscholastic, Spring ACAM for the 4th time. And so I love the comparison to sports and kind of giving students more localized, more access, more times to actually engage with employers through experiential learning and the IACBE community. And so basically the Scholastic Fall Live Case Competition Kit is about allowing schools to run a competition at their own school. So it is going to be synchronous, but it is something that could be done local or virtual. All of the interactions with the company and with the materials will be virtual, but if you want to run the competition locally and have local presentations, that's up for you to decide. Otherwise, you can do this whole thing virtually, including delivering the final presentation, which we're asking for a 3-minute recorded video and up to 10-page memo plus an appendix. And so the Scholastic Fall Live Case Competition Kit is a new offering. We're keeping it really inexpensive because we want lots of teams and lots of exciting commotion around this particular competition, and we want to be able to enable schools to run a competition locally. So you can have 2 teams compete against each other in a small class if that's the way you want to run it. You can offer it to every single student in your business college if that's the way you want to run it. You could also cherry pick students and put them on teams together and use it as a way to qualify students for the Fall Virtual Interscholastic Competition. For the Interscholastic Competition, there's only 1 group permitted per school, and you'll be competing against schools across the globe, both inside and outside the IACBE community. The students are going to be awarded a chance to present directly to the company in a synchronous fashion through a 10-minute final presentation, and they'll also be submitting a memo. Lastly, and most notably, our hallmark case competition is the ACAM Live Case Competition, which will happen in conjunction with the conference. If for whatever reason the conference cannot happen in person next year, this is again something that we could do virtually. And it's enabling students to understand that the world is changing, but yes, we can actually do work and collaborate virtually and deliver outcomes virtually that are very valuable. So these are just the timelines, which you can all see on our website. If you go to capstonesource.com/IACBE and choose the competition, basically the competition for registration is open for all of them. Early bird deadlines stagger as the competitions get closer to launch. This competition actually begins with the materials being released on September 9th, and then the actual a synchronous webinar that launches the competition will happen on September 14th. The fall virtual will begin on November 2nd with a webinar, and the deadline to register for that is October 23rd, with the deadline for early bird being September 30th. And then lastly, for Spring ACAM, December 31st is the early bird registration deadline. Regular registration is March 1st. We'll be kicking off the competition in early March on the 8th. And then the actual ACAM conference is a really cool experience. We try to make it much more of a professional development and networking experience, and not only about the competition. So there's one day of final presentations, a little bit of professional development, and a really cool excursion for the students on the Thursday to wrap up the conference. So this showcases a little bit about the pricing. These are all early bird pricings. So as the early bird deadline comes up and expires, these prices will be going up. So please register if you're interested. And we're offering a very cool bundle for these first two competitions. And so we really want the schools that are participating in the fall virtual to use the fall live case competition kit as a way to prep students. So if you're interested in both, you'll be getting a $200 discount, and that's only available for IACBE schools. Lastly, what do the students get out of this other than a meaningful learning experience? Is this accreditation? Is this recognition for amazing work that they could share on social media, LinkedIn, add as a badge to their resume, or as work experience? And so it's a really cool opportunity for them. This is a showcase of one of the most stellar students that was on the Oregon Tech team last time, who actually won the spring competition with CoinSource. So you get a really cool certificate. In addition to that, they were awarded an internship, which was actually not planned by us, but actually the company was so enthusiastic about the results that they offered internships to the entire winning team. And then lastly, the students got a cash award for winning as well. And so that will be between $100 and $250 for the students that actually walk away champions from that experience. So again, we're hosting a webinar dedicated to the competitions coming up, so you can ask questions there. Please join us next week at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register on the capstonesource.com/webinar page. Lastly, I did want to mention, as Phyllis mentioned earlier, that we have a library of open cases, including these two cases that were the fall virtual and the spring ACAM case competition prompts from last semester. And this is an incredible way for students to learn what's expected of them once they participate in the real thing. And one of the things that made the Oregon Tech team such a force to be reckoned with is the fact that they did an open case with Munevo after we published it on our website in preparation for the spring ACAM CoinSource competition. And it absolutely blew out of the water pretty much every other presentation and deliverable that was submitted previously. So these are really cool opportunities for students and educators to incorporate case studies that are based on old projects into the learning process for students. You can use this as a one-time class discussion, multi-week project. You can use this as practice for the competitions, or you could just use this as a way to kind of coach students through, like, hey, you don't know what you want to do with your career. Let's take a look through this list of projects and see, are any of these ideas somewhat interesting to you? And so that's a really good way to kind of coach them through, the ideas behind what's out there for them. So with that, I will say thank you, and I really appreciate those who are able to stick with us. The recording will be available, but we are so grateful to be a part of the IACBE community and a part of shaping students' lives and their careers. We really want them to be ready for day one. And not only that, we want them to be working with companies that want to be involved in their learning. And we really want to shift the way that companies look at education and recruitment. And that's really what the experiential bargaining is all about. And so we really think that institutions play a key role in that, and so do the educators. And so it's really not possible without you. But we've worked with hundreds of amazing educators, and we invite all of you to do the same. We have several clients that continue to buy products from us outside of just the competition that are in the IACBE network, and we're happy to connect you with them, including Mass Maritime and hopefully a new client, St. Peter's, who's doing a cool experience this fall as well. So with that, I will say thank you. I'm excited for the upcoming competitions, and I'm also excited to be a big part of experiential learning at your institution, whether it's through this thought leadership, if you have questions, or through our products and services. So thank you again, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Jordan. I had a couple people with questions, so if you're willing to stay on the line. Wendell, you had a question. If you still have it, I've opened your microphone.
Yes.
You still have a question?
Well, Jordan actually answered it with the whole idea of, because we already do live case, and we use that as a way to reach out to the local community, and it gives us a platform to get our kids jobs and things. But the whole idea of using it like with our honors, our business honors program, and having a competition there. So that's how I'll probably look at that. So he answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome.
And Sylvia, I saw you had a question. I saw you type some things in. I opened your microphone, Sylvia. Did you have anything else to add?
No, it's just I really enjoyed the presentation, and I am going to share with our faculty virtually. I think the case competition virtual, we were trying to figure out how to work all of that in. And initially I was going to ask a question about how schools were handling like internships that are already in process that may change or get cut short because of the COVID situation and not knowing when schools are open, you know, how everybody's going into the fall. But I will take that offline just to reach out to some other schools and things. But yeah, really interested in the case competition things. We were trying to figure out how we were going to do that this year, because most of the times our companies would bring case competition opportunities on campus when they would visit the weekly visits that we have set up. So that's interesting.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have one last just announcement for everybody, and you'll get this in the email that you receive after this, but we've got quite a few other webinars planned on July 9th. We're going to have Paul Millett and Bill Parrott from Peregrine talking about quality assurance. On August 6th, we're going to have Dr. Leah Matthews, the president of the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, talk to us about distance education and virtual learning and the direction that that's going. And then on August 20th, I'm really excited to announce that we're going to have Dr. Janice Carullo, who's going to speak about trauma-informed teaching, which is really taking the events of the last 4 to 5 months and what do you do with that in the classroom? How do you engage in discussions of that? How do you make it a safe environment for students to express themselves in a respectful way? So I think those will all be really exciting sessions. There'll be some others in between, but those are the ones that we have planned and scheduled. I want to thank Jordan and Ashley did our 8 a.m. session this morning, and they were both great. Thank you everybody for showing up. Again, you'll get an email in a couple hours that will tell you about some of the upcoming webinars, and we look forward to seeing you at webinars and hopefully in Orlando in April of 2021 at the annual conference. Thank you, everybody.